Rose,
Chris.
thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
How did you get started helping kids in Philadelphia?
Yeah, so I probably 4 or 5 years ago now started working with kids in the court system. So I was doing community service with them. So that was really what kickstarted me working with youth in the city. But when I was working with that program, we could only invest in them short term. So as long as they were in the program, which could have been in like 1 or 2 times sometimes. So we weren't seeing like the long-term fruit of investing in them. So that's when I went into ministry, and that eventually led me into this nonprofit so that we can invest in kids for the long term. That's kind of how I got going.
After a kid leaves the court system, how likely is it that they return?
We saw none of that. So at least in the way that I was serving, I couldn't have contact with them outside. So I could see them like a couple times, and then they'd be like, I'd never see them again. So there's like a lot of turnover. And I was doing that for about 2 years. There's only one kid in my whole time of doing that I was with like the whole time. Just pretty crazy.
Did you do a lot of camp counseling and serving young people when you were growing up?
I actually did, but in gymnastics. So there is a camp called Woodward, which is now purely action sports. So more like skateboarding and all that sort of stuff. They like eliminated cheerleading and gymnastics recently, but we'd go there for 12 weeks. Some of my friends and I, we'd serve every single week. It was like we'd start Sunday at 8 a.m. and we'd leave Saturday at 1 p.m. and then do the same thing. It was crazy. It was super fun though.
What are some overlaps between serving kids in the physical sense, in the gymnastic sense, and then serving them now, kind of the more psychological and kind of helping them learn from, emotional and mental standpoint?
Yeah, super good question. What's funny is I kind of do both right now. So we start with leveraging sports. So I do work with athletes. So that is one of the 4 pillars of our ministry. So I do still work with athletes. So we're still working on the physical side. But I think what's sweet about just like what we're able to do now is it doesn't just stop at the physical, but we're able to invest in them emotionally and spiritually too and help resource them. So when I was working at that camp growing up, again, it was like you would invest in these kids 1 week and then you would never see them again. And we had kids from actually at that camp like all over the world that we would be investing in. So it was like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids that you would see all summer, and then you'd never see them again.
Kind of reminds me of the short-term mission trips overseas that I would go on when I was in high school. It's like you raise this money, send the support letters, and then you fly to like Spain to like, a low-income neighborhood, and then you help out for a week, and then you go home. You never see the kids again. It's like, I feel like that was more for me than it was for the kids.
Right. Yeah. There's a few kids that I'm actually still connected with from my days in summer camp, but it's like very, very few. But yeah, it was hundreds of kids. And the camp itself, there was like thousands of kids there every week. So it was just like you're like swallowed up. But it was super fun.
How do you reconcile the natural life cycle of a relationship and that, sometimes you're going to minister to people and then they'll leave your life, or sometimes you might have friends or relationships that might leave your life, and then there's some that stick around. And how do you kind of reconcile making peace with people leaving your life, but also working hard to keep them in your life?
Yeah, no, that's a super good question. I think that is part of why my beginning days of ministry, I now have kind of transitioned the model of what I was originally doing. So in the beginning of my ministry days, it was kind of similar. We were investing in hundreds of kids, and you would see lots of fruit from that. But again, it was like we'd only really see them over the summer. And so a lot of those kids I wouldn't see during the school year. So now my goal is that we'd be like present in these kids' lives like throughout the whole year. And so still like kids come and go, but you want to be present in their lives and provide like consistency for them. That you're not just present like 3 months of the year, but you're actually present and like investing in them all throughout the school year. But you still like obviously lose kids of like kids' lives change, they like move places, and you see that even with like just friendships and relationships or like volunteers that we're working with of like they may just be here for a short term. So I think it's a daily battle of like figuring out where is it that I invest my time. And even for my volunteers, like helping them figure out where it is that God's calling them to truly like be investing in their time. Because we're limited people with like limited time. So you can't keep every single relationship. But you also want to like steward the relationships that are in your life like well and be like fully present with them. So it's continually like something I'm wrestling through, and different seasons too. There's like different people that I feel like I'm called to like invest heavier in. But part of that goal is to help them become like rooted in their communities too, and like be thriving individuals like in their communities. So, now previously I didn't have a team of volunteers. Now we have like lots of volunteers, which actually like helps me in a lot of regards, and is part of a goal of our mission is to like be present people and consistent people.
What are the 4 pillars?
Yeah, the 4 pillars are leveraging sport, equipping through mentorship, empowering local churches, and then the fourth part is partnering with resources. So we always start with sport. So that's like where we begin building relationships. Then equipping through mentorship, any kids that we meet on the field, we offer them mentorship relationships. We train up volunteers that then are able to mentor the kids and give more like one-on-one attention. And so helping them both emotionally and spiritually, and helping them get the resources they need. So they do that, and that's like a 1 to 2 year program that they commit to, and they are met with like weekly with those mentors. The third part is empowering local churches. So we work with local churches and are trying to bolster just partnerships and relationships. And so we have equipped churches, which there's plenty of equipped churches throughout the city, but really coming beside churches and building partnership and collaboration to really serve the youth in our city. And we're better together. So it has been like really sweet to do that. And then the fourth part is resourcing. So things like financial literacy classes for kids, providing accessible counseling services, any of that type of stuff. It's a great question.
I'm just taking those 4 pillars down. I'm not texting people.
Yeah, you're good.
I'm not on Snapchat.
Yeah.
So you're meeting these kids in such a tribal form, with gymnastics and, athleticism, which, you and me both know there's a big social component as well as like an emotional, even a little spiritual component to physical activity. How are you touching the lives of people who are locked in their homes on TikTok all day?
Yeah, no, super good question. I think that all starts with like relationships so we use sport as a platform to reach kids, but there's plenty of kids in our program that are not athletes. And some of that is just like being present where we are. And so we can't be present everywhere. So we've like picked a specific platform, but it isn't just like limited to that. So currently I partner with different sports teams in the city. And so I do what we call like character coaching. So I do some coaching, but a lot of what I'm doing is helping with team issues or any of that kind of stuff. So anything that would be related to like the kids' character. And so we do like team building stuff with different teams. And so that's what we've been doing with just different sports teams. But why we use sport is there's that physical aspect that then you're able to use that as a platform to talk about like character and like growth. And then that is like an in for us to share about the Bible. So that's why we use sport. But again, there's plenty of kids who are not athletes in our program. And a lot of that just bolsters from relationships. So you have a kid who you meet through sport and they're like, hey, I have this friend. Like, do you want to meet them? And can they like be part of this program? You're like, yeah, sure. And then they jump on board. And so, and that really is like how most of our relationships build, is like not just through sport, but it's like kids are so connected. And especially like what you were saying with like social media and TikTok, they're like even more connected. So they just know so many people. So you can't reach all of them, but that is like where we start.
There's so much athleticism and physicality in the Bible. I mean, there's so much body. Like, tell me a little bit about how you use that platform to segue into spiritual conversations with the kids.
Yeah, so I usually start with just different like characteristics. So we are talking about like character coaching. So we can talk about perseverance, and so we can talk about that in earthly terms. We also can talk about that in spiritual terms, and then that bolsters like a conversation about the Bible of like, what does God say about perseverance? And so, we talk about strength. We talk about leadership, and all of those are things that we can take from the perspective of the Bible. So, like when we talk about strength, often the conversation turns to of like, well, why does Paul like boast about how he is so weak, and in his weakness, then he finds the strength of the Lord. And so we talk about how there's like limitations on our strength. Where does that lead? Is it leads to how we're limited beings, and ultimately like God is the strongest of them all. And so we can rely upon the Lord like for our strength. And so every characteristic we kind of like talk about ends up leading into a Bible conversation. Also, all the kids, even when we don't like start with that aspect of the kids, know I'm a Christian and I believe the Lord. And so any sports team I'm working with, it usually ends up in some sort of conversation about the Bible, because they're just curious. And so they just enter into conversation. They're like, Miss, what is this? Where they'll like come out with TikTok videos. That is so often how it starts. They're like, we saw this on TikTok. What do you think about this? Like, sometimes it's related to the Bible, sometimes it's not. And then we can have a whole conversation about how like ultimately scripture is where we have to figure out like who God is, not just platforms like TikTok, but it's super funny.
How much of this understanding of I'm going to hell do you think is living hell on earth here versus just kind of the fiery blazes that we're talking about in the Bible versus, or like I'm going to heaven, meaning that this life I'm spending here is one of purpose and of peace and that presentness there?
No, it's a great question. I think often what they're finding on TikTok is like they're fearful of death. And so that is what leads the conversation about like the rapture and all that sort of stuff that we see in Revelation. And so, often where I lead a conversation like that is we just start about like, why are you afraid of death? And so what makes you fearful about death? And so often that's a conversation about like, well, I'm fearful of hell. And so that ends up leading to a conversation where we're actually talking. So like, yes, the wages of sin are death, but like the free gift that God gives us is eternal life through him. And ultimately, God is a God of love. And so we're able, to have conversations through that aspect that God ultimately, we see back in Genesis, right? That like God created the earth perfectly, but then sin distorted that. And so our punishment for sin is death, but yet God is a God who is a redeemer. And so he's been redeeming his creation since then. So yes, I do think absolutely we see glimpses of hell here on earth because of like brokenness that has entered. But through the Lord, I think there's both hope here and now on this side of eternity, but we long for like the perfect day where like all things are made new. So we get glimpses of both like hell and heaven here. And so, but we, yeah, obviously are longing for heaven where all things are made new. I think we all can say, like, often a question I ask kids when they're struggling with like, well, I don't want to like leave these sins, or I don't want to, or they're just like struggling with the brokenness of the world, is we often, the question that I ask is like, do you want to like live for this broken world, or do you want to live for like a home that like all these things are going to be redeemed? Which kind of puts, and I have to be reminded of that too, it puts it into perspective that, yeah, this world truly is broken. And I think in Philly sometimes too, we see that in like even more profound ways, because it's just like we see it. Whereas I think in other areas, sometimes we don't like realize our need for Christ. But Philly, it's like, it's often on display. And so, yeah, it's a great question.
Do you fear death?
I do not fear death. It's funny enough, I was having a conversation with a kid about this the other day. We were sitting at dinner and we were talking about just death. She was like, I'm so scared of death. And this is a kid who loves the Lord. Yeah, the reason I don't fear death is because the surety of Christ. And so I don't have to fear hell or damnation. But I can like long for heaven because of the love that Christ has shown. Yeah, but I think there is like a wrestling there of like, what is death like? What is heaven like? And those are like questions kids consistently ask of like, well, heaven is like, we're going to see Jesus face to face. And like, what else would we want than that? I think in some ways too, of like, when you experience so much like brokenness and suffering, is like, there's almost this like even greater longing for eternity. And so I feel like in a lot of ways, I don't fear death, but wouldn't say in like a grim way I look forward to death, but in a lot of ways I do. Like, I'm here and present as long as God has me here, but I'm also like longing for heaven where those things will be like made new and I get to see Jesus face to face. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. What a beautiful day that will be, though, and all things will be redeemed. Yeah.
What's it like running a nonprofit all by yourself?
Man, it's been an adventure. It's been so fun in the sense that I love like visionary and like innovative work. So running like in my gifting has been so fun. But in the same breath, I think I didn't realize what I was getting myself into, which I feel like a lot of people who start nonprofits will say too, is like, I didn't realize all the things that I was getting myself into. So it's been like such a gift and so fun. But I think this year where I'm more focused is like setting it up so that it can thrive for the long term. And so a lot of vision stuff and like even what you were talking about, core values of like setting the vision for the ministry and just the structure of it and getting like a good base that we can grow upon. So that's been a little different for me because I'm like usually someone who's like very people driven. And so I've had to pull back like a little bit from that so I can focus more on that. So that's been like the biggest shift for me is like, I just want to spend all the time with all the people, but I'm like, I can't so that I can like set this up for the long term. So that's been a big shift, but it has been super fun. I hope in the next year or 2 years or 3 years that it won't just be me. I don't want it to just be me. So it's not just me in the sense that we have like tons of volunteers. There's like 20 mentors across the city. We have a board. So there's lots of people like on the ground doing the work, but we would love to have staff in the future. So that's the long term, but we need to have a good base of a ministry. This is me reminding myself this. We need to have a good base of ministry so that we can eventually staff it. Yeah, so it's been a shift, but it's been super fun.
Do you find yourself enjoying the present moment with the kids so much that you are sometimes like, oh, all the vision stuff, I'm kind of like shelving all that? Or are you kind of more like so big picture oriented that you're like, oh man, I kind of miss working with the kids? Like which way do you feel yourself being pulled into?
I feel like it goes both ways. I think early, like winter time, I think I was longing for like more time with students. And just like with volunteers and all that sort of stuff. So like more of the field work. Right now, or like this past, I was just in track and field season. Track and field season is like, it is fast and furious. So it's like a lot of time with a lot of kids, all the people time. So I was like really longing for that to like pull back so that I could spend more time on visionary stuff. So I've now arrived at that, and I think I'll have a good balance for the summer, which will be good. So I got a lot to work to do in that vein.
Tell me a bit about your plan and strategy upcoming and how empowering churches plays into that.
Great question. So we kind of started with the first two pillars, where the pillars kind of build on themselves. So we had started with the first two pillars. The mentorship program actually it's been about a year and a half that it's been being built, maybe even longer than that, but that it's been being built and then like hitting the ground running. And so we wanted to build that and have like a sweet infrastructure that we could like build upon. So the goal of the mentorship program is any student that we meet through sport or through relationships. So the leveraging sport pillar, mentorship is a bridge that we have between what we're doing on the field and then local churches. So we're doing discipleship and mentorship like in that stage, but the eventual goal is that they're being rooted in a community that they can thrive, and that they can be discipled, and there's like lots of people pouring into them. So then they're like rooted in a community. So mentorship is kind of like our bridge between that. So now we're starting to build out how do we come beside churches? How do we provide like additional trainings for churches? So like suicide prevention trainings, or like additional equipping things that could help support churches as they're just working with urban youth. And then we're hoping to build like official partnerships that when we have a student who's on the field, there's now in the mentorship program, we want them to, whoever that mentor is, to be rooted in a local church that they're now like bringing them and helping them integrate into the life of the church. So we're hoping to build official partnerships over this next year. And so we've been kind of fleshing that out of like, what is our statement of faith, and how do we really want that to function? And so laying out vision for churches of, we're not adding more work to your plate, but we're really hoping to like come beside churches with trainings, but also like growing their congregations, of like bringing more students their way. And so that's really the goal of that. And we're hoping it won't just function in silos, but it will really function as like a collaboration. So we've been doing that a little bit over this past year and a half. We've been holding like worship nights, and it's like a conglomerate of churches that come together, and it's been so sweet that like all these youth groups and just youth across the city come together in these churches, like investing in them through like serving together. And so we've had like, how that kind of functions is like we have worship teams of like people from across all churches. We've been bringing in different speakers, and then we obviously have the youth who are from all these churches. So it's like they're all serving and working together as we like work to serve those kids. And so it's been really, really sweet. So that's what we're hoping with just churches over next year. It should be fun. It's like, that's the kind of stuff I love.
A few weeks ago, I had Vince from Keystone Family Alliance, who I think I invited you to one of our hangouts. Yeah, so we couldn't make it there. But he's helping foster kids. But the same thing, he's like working with churches directly to help churches support the families that are fostering the kids. Yeah. So you create this mesh, this matrix that's supporting everyone rather than just the individual themselves. And the exciting thing is that a lot of churches would be like, what are we supposed to be doing in terms of like service? But it gives the people of the church such a great opportunity to come around and like to support something. Like, okay, here's our task. Here's what we have to do.
Yeah. And it's fun too. Like churches have been super excited about it. That like we've had some like initial conversations with a few churches, and they're like super excited about it because they're like, this will like help us serve like not only their own youth, but also like connecting even kids from their neighborhood who they're like trying to reach, of like it's giving them an avenue to be able to do that, which is like pretty cool. And then just providing like additional resources of like you run into different challenges with these kids, and you want to like serve them best. And so sometimes we're like limited in those ways. So sometimes it's helpful having like networks that you can then just like help them navigate some of those different challenges.
How much of your service with the kids is accountability and helping them stay, safe and pure and out of trouble?
Yeah, super good question. That's what a lot we're doing with like the mentorship it pretty much provides them a direct, like provides them a relationship that like they're being loved on, but also like being held accountable. And so like the accountability is like branched out of a heart of love, of like, I love you so much that like I want what is best for you. And so like you're helping them with that. So accountability is a huge part of what we do. I think you even see that in the infrastructure of our ministry, is like even our board is under one church body. The reason our board is under one church body is because we have direct built-in accountability, that like our board members are known, I am known, and so we wanted to build it that way so that there's like accountability even within like the life and structure of the nonprofit. And so we have different avenues of like our vision team works with our board, but our vision team doesn't necessarily have voting rights, but they do have influence. And so those are people from different churches that they attend all of our board meetings. They have great influence. But the accountability is like held under the local church body. But within relationships with the kids, accountability is obviously huge. I think accountability is sometimes like a new and a fresh thing for them, that like maybe they haven't been held accountable in the ways that we're helping to like help keep them accountable. And again, that's like all out of a heart of love. And also that like it takes time to build that too. Like you have to build trust with them before you're able to like be like, can I help keep you accountable? And so it really is like a mutual relationship. And it's a lot of like building trust to like obviously get to that point. And we want to even help the kids navigate of like, not even just in the mentor relationship, but even when they're integrated like into a local church body, of like, who are the people who like really know you, and are going to help navigate you in the right direction of like, you want to be known. And so that they can like help redirect you when you're like going the wrong path. And so that's like a big part of what we do with like discipleship, and then even helping integrate them in churches.
Yeah, attending middle school youth group, we have like sex purity night or whatever it was called, like oh, there's something, I forget what it was called, but like ingrained at, like 12 years old. It's like, yeah, like stay like accountable for this and stuff. But you take that for granted, and then, just not have none of that, and then be like 16, 17, and then, working with the kids that you are now. And then it's the
Yeah.
first time they're exposed to like accountability.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. I tend to like navigate that a little bit different, especially with a new student who's like newer to the Lord. Is like, we want to be like truthful about the Bible. So like, you don't want to shy away from truth. Like, ultimately, we're accountable to the Lord. So you want them to know truth and to live in truth, but we're not going to want to live in truth unless we truly know who God is. And so we want kids to like actually live out of the overflow of what Christ has done for them. And so them falling so in love with Jesus that like that is leading them into a place of obedience. And so not like starting with obedience and then helping them like foster that love for Jesus, because then we become like legalistic of like, we're just doing things to do things, but we want them to like live out of the overflow. Because let's be real, like the Bible has a lot of hard things that like, if I'm just like thrown truth, I'm like, no, no, no. But if I know who God is and his like beautiful design and how he like created those things for his glory, but also for our good, then I'm going to like want to be obedient to those things because I want to like experience Christ even more and more. And so they kind of like a flip switch. So we're like really truthful about the Bible, but also like our main focus is that kids really are rooted in like the love of the Lord.
You're not a vibes organization.
No. Yeah.
Jesus vibes.
Yes, Jesus vibes. Do this, do this, do this, but we're not going to tell you why. Yeah.
How much of pain or suffering or a real understanding of the brokenness do the young people need to experience in order for them to really desire a meaningful change in a relationship that you're talking about with Christ?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I don't necessarily think we like need to. I will say I think like huge part of my story is like deep rooted suffering that eventually like I had nowhere else to turn, and that's like when I turned to Christ. And that was like when I was 22 years old, that like had never heard about who God was. And then at 22 years old, like God kind of intersected and was like, this is who I am. And so people were sharing the gospel with me. But it took me until I was like at my deepest, lowest point with like feeling like I was stripped of everything before I had really understood who like God was. And so I think God can use deep, deep suffering. But not everyone's life is written that way. And so then how does God speak into that? Well, yeah, I think it's like helping someone understand in their life, like why they need Christ, right? So someone with like a lot of money, right? So let's even like, so they may not be like suffering, but they like may be comfortable and have everything, right? So how do you speak into someone's life like that? Which is not true of many of the like people I'm working with, but like someone who's like may have not like experienced as much suffering. And it's like, how do you speak into their life? Well, like God speaks a lot about that of like, and we even look at money, right? Of like, I often talk to kids about, like when I was chasing after gymnastics of like, I was rooting my identity in gymnastics. Well, I achieved all the things that I wanted to in gymnastics. And so could I have like accomplished more? Sure. But like even after I was chasing after those things and accomplished them, it was like the next minute I was empty. And I'm like, well, that didn't like fill my heart. And so then you're looking to the next thing. I'm like, well, then I'll find a successful job. Well, that didn't fill my heart either. And so what is it that's going to fill my heart? And then we have this like never ending chase after like things of the world, but we're still left empty. And so that just like turns us into chasing more. And so God speaks into that, right? Like our ultimate identity is being a child of the Lord. And so when we're rooted in that, all the other things of the world, like we find deep meaning in like who God has created us to be and living within the functions of like how he called us to. And so when we're outside of that, like, yeah, we're going to be left empty when our identity is rooted in something God hasn't created it to be rooted in. Yeah. And so that is like also a piece of my story, but I feel like God mostly used suffering. And so a lot of the kids we work with in the city obviously have like, a lot of them have experienced like a lot of suffering in their life. And so often the conversations are a little bit different of it speaking into like, how could God allow suffering? Or like, why has God allowed me to experience these things? And so it's a little bit of like a shift. So I think they more so like realize the depravity of the world, the brokenness of the world, and because it's like so on display in so many aspects of their lives. And so it's helping them unravel those things. Yeah, so I even remember like when I moved to the city and I just saw like what deep, loving Christian relationships could look like and like friendships, that I'm like, where has this been all my life? And I was confused of like, and obviously those relationships are still imperfect, but they do function a little bit different than like the world would. Is like the world, I was used to people abandoning me, whereas like Christians, like they were there to like love and serve, and like they, even when they made mistakes, like they're asking for forgiveness and repentance. And so it was like a huge shift for me. And so it's even helping as we're integrating kids into the life of a local church, of like helping them to like navigate just like those discrepancies they may have like seen in their life. And that again leads to conversations about the Bible of like, how did God create us to in the garden? How did he create us to originally function and be? Yeah, it's a good question.
I love how you draw that. I don't think I've heard that before. We hear a lot about I was suffering and I was in deep pain, and that led me to pursue a life of peace and purpose. But to have, no, I had everything. I'm not saying this is your story, but there could be the person who had everything and everything was going for them, but everything they chased, ended up feeling like nothing at the end of it. It's like that in itself is suffering. I mean, to have that feeling of nothingness after a long pursuit, that leads you to pursue a life of peace and purpose.
Yeah, I think you even see that, like, I often tell kids about, like, Tom Brady. You even see that in Tom Brady's story of, like, he obviously doesn't know the Lord, but when he was chasing after Super Bowls, he kept getting more Super Bowls, and then what did he want? He wanted more. Why did he want more? Is because he ultimately, like, wasn't fulfilled. And so, and I think you see that in a lot of athletes of like, they accomplish like the greatest goal. And so like they win a Super Bowl or they win an Olympic medal or they accomplish the greatest goal in their athletic career. And then what do? They want more. They're like, well, that lasted a minute. So they have like great joy at the moment, but then they're like empty the next day. Like, how do you reconcile that discrepancy? Well, if your identity is rooted in it, like, what are you going to turn to next? You're either going to go back to it or you have to find something new that you will like hope will fulfill you. It's crazy. Yeah.
You said something earlier. I was stockpiling a question and I forgot it because I got interested in what you were saying. It's gone. No worries.
Lead in there.
I was a little, you could probably hear I was a little sick a few days ago, so my brain is still like, waking up doing the morning stretches. Something I've come to learn, kind of like a lot of the relationship advices you'll see online or stuff. It's like, ooh, be wary of the person who has abandonment issues or the trauma issues because hurt people hurt and, damaged goods and they're never coming back. And I've come across a few of those. But what I've really come to learn lately is you can actually really support a person out of that with unconditional love. It's kind of like the story of Star Wars, if you're familiar, like Darth Vader.
I'm like, I know some of Star Wars, but keep going.
Well, Darth Vader basically has toxic controlling relationships with his mother and then his lover, where he's trying to control keeping them from dying. And it's not until his son expresses unconditional love for him, he would rather die than kill his father.
Yeah.
That it's that point where he's actually able to overcome that trauma, that abandonment, that fear of loss. I think it's a beautiful story, and I think it's really cool how the kids that are engaging in church with you these days are able to kind of experience that unconditional love.
Yeah. I think one of the things I warn kids about, though, is like, again, we're like limited beings. And so, yeah, like, one, I only have so much time to invest. So like in some ways I feel like I'm always like looking to be more present and spend more time and work through those things. But ultimately, like, I'm a limited being. And so often one of the things I have to tell kids is like, one, I'm going to mess up in some ways. And so like, please be gracious to me when I mess up. But like, my goal is to be as present as I can and to invest in you as long as like God calls me. But yeah, in like different seasons, like life changes too, right? So like kids go off to school. So like our relationship is going to look different. But I think what's beautiful though is like in Christ, like God never leaves us. And so even when we're like struggling through relationships changing, and I know that can like be hard for people who have like faced abandonment before, of even when someone's not like directly abandoning them, like even a relationship changing can actually be really hard. And so helping them like navigate those things, but also like reminding them that like Christ is going to like hold them fast until eternity. And so like he is a God who's never going to leave nor forsake them. And so reminding them of truth, but also like as the body of Christ, like we're also called to like love those people well. And so I'm going to love and be present as much as I'm able in the times that God has called me to. But like in different seasons, also those like relationships will look different. Yeah, so it's a really good question, but it's interesting, like in my own life navigating it, and then which is so sweet, and seeing like how I'm able to like come beside kids in that way of like, which is I think why like takes a lot of time to build trust with people who have like faced those things. And so in some ways, like, yeah, takes time to build trust, but also like for them to know that like you're not just there to be there, which is also why I'm like committed to the city for as long as God calls me. Why? Is because I'm not just here for a short term and then gonna like dip out. Like I'm either gonna like do it or I'm not gonna do it. And so I'll be here as long as God calls me, but I'm not just here for like a short term to like try and make an impact and then dip out. No, I like want to be present as long as like God has me here. And that was like a conviction I had from the friend when we were talking about earlier with like the kids with the court systems, when I was doing community service with them, of like, I so wanted to like be with them longer, because like you can drop seeds and like help invest them in those short periods of time, but like there's so much more impact when you're able to like be present in like someone's life for the long term. Even if that means just like you're showing up to a track meet like once a week, or like a track practice once a week for like every single week. And so you're there like clockwork. Like the kids now know that like you're present with them, that like you're not just here and dipping out, like you are gonna be there. And so consistency is like always a huge thing we're like emphasizing.
I turned 30, and so I'm at the age where all my friends are getting hitched. All the ones that didn't get hitched in their early 20s are now getting hitched. And they used to be like, yeah, Philly's my home. Gonna live here forever. Love it. And like their wives are driving them out into like suburb land. It's like,
Yeah.
enjoy your lawn. Like enjoy your driveway if that's what you want.
Yes.
But at time of writing, I'm right there with you. I mean, I feel called to live in Philadelphia to live here. It's like, yeah, we had a mass shooting in Fairmount, 3 blocks from my house. And man was murdered right outside my house, and I mean, yeah, it's there, but no, I feel similarly to you. Like, I think that you're teaching the people that you serve something when there's a consistency.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And I think it would, in some ways, yeah, which this is just like a work of the Lord of like, it would be so much easier to live somewhere else. If I was looking for easy, I would have left this job way long ago, probably after the first week. But there is like such deep joy in being where like God has called me and gifted me. And so there is like deep joy in like serving in that way. But I like constantly have to remind myself of like, yeah, like God, you see all throughout the Bible, it's like God didn't call his people to easy things. But when we have that like view of eternity, there actually is great joy in serving the kingdom where God has called us, but we also can like long for things to be made new. And so, yeah, it's been a journey with ministry. I think I think I shared this with you before. It's like I think it was my first year of ministry, we lost 3 students. And so just in a short time, and one of those he wasn't exactly a student. He was one of our interns. But one of my good friends was shot and killed on his block. And he was like one of those people who was so present with those kids and like really had grown up in Philly his whole life, like knew the streets of Kensington, was really able to like speak into these kids' lives, and really thought we'd be like serving with LeVan for years to come. But I think what I'm always reminded so much about LeVan of, he had opportunities to get out of the city, that like, yeah, he could have like dipped out and left, but like, no, he was like so invested in his neighborhood of like, he's like, no, I'm going to like serve my people as long as I can while I'm here on earth. And so like, obviously through sin and just brokenness, that was cut short. And we like miss him so stinking much. But in the same breath, it's like, he was just like a sure example of he was so committed to the city and to his people, but we obviously like grieved his death in like hard, horrific ways, but also in the same breath, like we know where he is. And so he's dancing and joking in heaven still, where he was such a goofball. Yeah, and so LeVan's always a constant reminder to us of like why we do what we do and why we're committed to the city. Yeah.
What's next for you, Rose?
What's next for us? Yeah, over this next year, we're going to be working on more church partnership stuff. We're still building out the mentorship program, and so we're just hoping to like continue to grow, just narrow vision, and just to keep plugging on what we're doing. And yeah, and that 4th pillar with resourcing of trying to build out some like financial literacy classes for kids, and so we're gonna start doing a little bit of that this summer. But we're just hoping to like narrow vision over this next year and just like have a solid infrastructure to like work off of. So those are our main goals. My goal is to put boundaries around, as we talked about earlier, about how much time I'm spending with people with kids on the field. So I'm going to have to be like a little more strategic with that this year than I normally would be, because I would spend all the time just on the sports field at all the games, at all their activities, but I can't do that this year. So
We could talk another hour about boundaries.
yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. My schedule always shifts too, and that's like part of my struggle. It's like
Got to get you a personal assistant
right.
to schedule your stuff.
Well, one of the first people I'm hoping to hire is an admin. So hoping they will help alleviate some of that like just administrative work so I can focus more on like what God's called me to do. But we'll get there.
Where can we find your organization?
You can find us one on Instagram. So I think it's Philadelphia Urban Youth Collab. Was it the @ symbol before it? And then our website is same thing. So Philadelphia Urban Youth Collab, not collaborative, collab.org. Yeah, we're hoping to stay tuned on our website. It's like a little clunky right now. So we're hoping it'll be a little less clunky soon. So summer project.
Rose, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.